It's called The View?
It's called The View. It's not called The Facts.
Yeah, but
It's
isn't it interesting that it's called, I mean, I don't think they meant this when Barbara Walters invented it a long time ago, but it's The View.
well,
That's the problem in America.
But there's
There is
clearly-
one view,
Right, and that's
one
clearly actually-
true opinion, and everybody else can go sit in the corner.
that's correct.
Sunny Hostin never stops ripping on the cops. View co-host Sunny Hostin says she introduced her son to the police ahead of time so they don't harass him for jogging in her all-white neighborhood.
The episode started like any normal morning on The View. Bright studio lights, cheerful greetings, and a panel ready to jump into another debate. But the calm didn't last long. What seemed like a typical discussion quickly turned into a moment no one could ignore. Sunny Hostin leaned in with confidence, expecting her comment to win support, but it immediately backfired. Greg Gutfeld responded first, relaxed and amused, as if he had seen it coming. Bill Maher followed, steady and sharp, breaking down her argument piece by piece. Their combined humor and clarity turned the entire exchange into a surprising on-air takedown.
To hear you use the term, because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
And so
migrate.
why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Alert to injustice, who's not for that? But words do migrate. Now, I'll use any term you want,
Okay.
because maybe that is a word that's triggering, and so let's not use that word. I don't know, want to call it the super far left?
Okay, so there is Bill just laying out something true. You can see the way Sunny Hostin, the way she's touching her above her eye, she can't even look at him as she's talking to him because she's an activist, not a journalist or whatever it is that she purports to be.
What made the moment so harsh was how unprepared Sunny looked. She stopped mid-sentence, her face shifting between shock and worry, as if she suddenly understood that everything she thought she controlled had slipped away on live television. She tried to keep going, holding on to her argument as though it might rescue her, but it only made things worse. The silence around her felt heavier with every second. Then came the final blow. In an attempt to regain control, she threw out the word woke, hoping it would shut down the debate. Instead, it turned against her, showing everyone she had completely lost the moment.
I think a conservative once said to me, what you guys in the liberal side of it don't get about Donald Trump is we don't like him either.
Yeah.
It's just that in this country, it's binary. I mean, gender may not be binary, but politics is. You only get two choices. And the stuff that they are afraid of, they see Donald Trump as a bulwark against, and that stuff is a lot closer to the home. It's like my kid is coming home from school and they're not allowed to tell me if they're transitioning. The school is going to take the side of the kid over the parent. Stuff like that.
Sunny insisted that conservatives had taken the word and twisted it away from its original meaning in black activism. But Bill Maher wasn't convinced. Staying calm, he pushed back, not by denying its history, but by pointing out how the term had slowly turned into something people mocked, including many who once used it proudly. He didn't attack its roots, he highlighted how it changed over time, and the point landed perfectly. Maher reminded everyone that a movement built on fairness had somehow turned into a race to see who could act the most offended. The mood on the set shifted immediately. Faces tightened, glances bounced around, and even her co-hosts looked uncomfortable, as if they wished the cameras would cut away. Greg leaned back with a quiet grin, knowing he didn't need to interrupt. Sunny was slipping fast. Trying to regain control, she wandered into a strange side story about tipping delivery drivers and buying fire logs. In a discussion about cultural language, it sounded completely out of place. What followed wasn't confidence, it was a slow unraveling, a struggle to appear thoughtful as her argument fell apart. Greg and Bill recognized the moment instantly. And this time, they weren't just responding to her, they were taking apart the entire act, piece by piece.
It's about the view. It's become like a medical hospital that displays human misfailure. Here, let's look at this political oddity. It really is like the left-wing equivalent of a carnival sideshow, except instead of bearded ladies and fat clowns and two-headed cows. Well, let me rephrase that. The View is a victim of the sunk cost fallacy. You know, how can you now speak the truth and when for years you've been telling lie after lie after lie? Now you're carrying this big bag of rocks around you because it's too harmful for their ego to admit that we really were dishonest.
Then came the moment that sent the internet into a frenzy. Bill Maher didn't shout or sound angry. He didn't have to. He delivered one calm line that hit harder than any insult. Don't tell me the left hasn't changed. The room went still. For a brief moment, it felt as if the air had been sucked out of the studio. Sunny froze, blinking in shock, as if someone had unplugged her mid-argument. Maher continued, explaining how the people who once defended open discussion had become the strongest voices demanding everyone think the same. The irony hung over the table like a weight. That's when Greg stepped in, blunt and steady. He described the show as nothing more than a political performance pretending to be a real conversation. He even called it a hospital for human misfailure, cutting through the tension with a sharpness that couldn't be ignored. Sunny's arguments had already fallen apart into scattered stories and nervous emotion. She couldn't look Maher in the eye. Her hands trembled, her face tightened, and she rubbed her forehead as if searching for a way out. But there wasn't one. The cameras were still rolling, and this time, the spotlight wasn't forgiving.
We have our own kind of way of demonizing, but we don't do it the way we'll say.
We
like
do it tastefully.
Tastefully, I think we're very low key in demonizing people. We'll say you smack of socialists, but we won't call you. But we go like, you know, but it is nice. I do think it's refreshing that they've moved on from Hitler. They probably had a morning meeting. They probably had like Pol Pot. No, not enough people know who Pol Pot is. Mao, well, he's kind of short. So maybe Mussolini was tall, and that's why they said pint-sized Mussolini. The point is, people have to wonder, where does Sunny Hostin get her opinions?
Yeah.
Like you said, and it's obviously from her husband. She has to tell her what to say on The View, because without it, she's got nothing up there.
This moment wasn't only about Sunny's opinions. It showed how completely unprepared she was when faced with people who wouldn't soften their words for her. For once, the studio didn't clap. Instead, the room filled with awkward silence and uneasy looks, as if everyone hoped someone else would jump in first. Then the tension finally broke. Greg, never one to hold back, delivered a comment so sharp it shocked even the viewers. He said Sunny didn't form her own views, claiming she borrowed them from her husband. Then came the second hit, she's not very bright. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was harsh, but it landed because she had nothing steady to defend herself with. Sunny froze, and Bill Maher stepped in, not to attack, but to put the moment in perspective. Calmly, he pointed out the reality of the situation. Sunny tried to shift the conversation again, leaning on familiar phrases, but Greg interrupted. "You're not a journalist," he said. "You're an activist pretending to be one." The message was clear. This wasn't bullying. It was a long overdue confrontation, exposing how scripted and disconnected the show had become, with Sunny standing right at the center of it.
Can we just understand that part of our sorry racial history in this country is that the point of view from a black person is often going to be very different and sometimes shocking to a white person.
View co-host Sunny Hostin says she introduced her son to the police ahead of time so they don't harass him for jogging in her all-white neighborhood. Roll it, Elvis.
As a mother of black children, I know that black boys are not given the presumption of innocence and the presumption of youth. I have had to be in the position where I have gone to my local police department because I know my son is going to be training for the Junior Olympics, running around the neighborhood in an all-white neighborhood, and I have brought him to the police and said, "He belongs to me. This is my son. Do not harass him. Do not stop him."
Just when it seemed things couldn't get more uncomfortable, Sunny managed to make it worse. She started throwing out opinions like she was trying to win an award for the most out-of-touch commentator on TV. Every statement sounded like something she had searched online 5 minutes before the show. It wasn't just a list of opinions, it felt like an endless spread of recycled arguments delivered with a smile and a loud, forced confidence. Her voice grew more energetic, but her points became even harder to follow. Greg and Bill didn't even bother responding anymore. They simply watched, entertained, as her reasoning collapsed moment by moment. Sunny kept tossing dramatic buzzwords into the air, hoping for applause that never arrived. She spoke as if she were delivering a powerful speech, yet the content jumped wildly from personal stories to social issues to grocery prices with no connection at all. Bill gave her a patient look, the kind a teacher gives a student pretending to know the material. Greg didn't need to speak, one raised eyebrow said everything. Then Sunny dropped the line that stunned the room. She claimed that having a thoughtful discussion was a form of privilege. In her view, calmly talking about difficult topics meant you were too fortunate to understand reality. The idea was so twisted it felt like she was arguing against basic logic itself. Bill stayed steady and answered with one quiet, decisive line.
But don't tell me the left
Or
had...
maybe the super far right.
Well, he's
Well,
talking about the left. Well, then
Okay, but we talked about that. I mean, I think we agree about the danger of the super far right, and I can't say it enough. I think they're the bigger threat. But don't tell me that the left hasn't changed.
She is feeling guilty about being a successful black lady who lives with white people, so she has to play.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Successful slave-owning black woman. Get it right.
Yeah, slave owned. Her ancestors owned
Yes.
slaves. So she has to play up this like I am a target of oppression, so she can remain on a credentialed level with other blacks.
Bill Maher ended the moment with one calm sentence: reality doesn't require a trauma resume. It was quiet but final, and it stopped the entire conversation in its tracks. Sunny froze again, blinking like she couldn't process what had just happened. By that point, her pattern was easy to see. If someone's experience matched her own, she praised it as enlightened. If it didn't, she dismissed it as ignorance or labeled it with one of her usual accusations. The discussion stopped being an exchange and turned into an attempt to control the narrative. Whenever her argument slipped, she simply shifted the standards. Personal stories mattered only when they supported her point, otherwise, she brushed them aside. The more she spoke, the more tangled her reasoning became, swinging from outrage to vulnerability, leaving behind a trail of contradictions disguised as certainty. It wasn't debate anymore. It was confusion wrapped in confidence. Greg didn't even have to say much. His expression carried all the commentary he needed, half amused, half satisfied. Sunny kept trying to climb to the moral high ground, but Greg looked like he was watching a comedy show unfold in front of him. At this point, it wasn't a discussion. It was a complete unraveling. Sunny had given them her entire argument, and when Maher and Gutfeld examined it, there was nothing solid inside, just empty space.
For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe.
I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
Sunny walked onto the set that day acting like she was ready to teach a masterclass. But as the debate unfolded, she found herself trying to explain arguments that were falling apart faster than she could rescue them. Each time she tried to regain control, her emotions tangled her logic, and the gap between what she wanted to say and what she actually delivered grew wider. Then came the comment that pushed everything from messy to downright embarrassing. Sunny threw another claim into the conversation, this time aimed directly at Republican women. She insisted that many white women, especially those who are married, support the patriarchy because it supposedly benefits them. According to her, they vote based on whatever their husbands tell them so the household can prosper. The table fell silent, not because the idea was bold or insightful, but because it sounded outrageous. She wasn't simply disagreeing with women. She was accusing them of being mindless followers, trapped in marriages where their choices weren't their own. Greg didn't argue. He just tilted his head with a blank expression, like someone watching a slow disaster unfold. The look alone said, "Did she seriously say that on live television?" Maher didn't even bother jumping in. He didn't have to. The claim collapsed on its own. It wasn't an argument. It was a verbal grenade that blew up before anyone else touched it. And that's the core problem with Sunny. She doesn't open the door for discussion, she hands out moral judgments. Every disagreement becomes a personal accusation. She doesn't aim for understanding. She aims for applause. She wants approval, agreement, and admiration. But instead of getting cheers, she was met with uncomfortable silence and the kind of tight smiles people make when they're witnessing something they wish they hadn't. Still, she pushed ahead, raising her voice as if volume equaled victory. The strangest part. On paper, she should dominate any panel. She's educated, experienced, and trained to communicate. But instead of using clear reasoning and solid evidence, she hides her arguments behind identity and personal emotion. Every topic turns into a sermon. Every counterargument becomes a threat. She doesn't discuss issues, she declares her views as the only acceptable ones. Greg and Maher weren't plotting some big takedown. They didn't need to. They simply pointed out the holes in her reasoning. Greg did it with sharp humor. Maher did it with quiet logic. Together, they exposed how shaky her arguments were once they were outside an echo chamber. Without a supportive audience or rehearsed agreement from the table, her points fell apart. She claimed to be the voice of reason, but she delivered theater, not substance, catchphrases instead of clarity, frustration instead of facts. Greg looked like he was fighting back laughter. Maher just seemed tired of watching common sense take a beating. They weren't attacking her, they were stopping the entire show from collapsing under the weight of her contradictions. But Sunny sat with her arms crossed, chin lifted, convinced she was winning. The crowd didn't buy it. They stayed quiet because the disconnect was obvious. She wasn't defending ideas. She was performing. Eventually, Greg stopped engaging entirely. He let her talk. And that's when things spiraled further. Every point she made sounded like it came from a collection of slogans rather than real thought, like a motivational talk scraped together from social media posts. When she tried to bring up systemic injustice yet again, Greg casually mentioned her enormous salary. The studio dropped into silence. She had just called herself the voice of the unheard, and you could almost hear the audience thinking, since when? Who chose you to represent them? Sunny drifted away from debate and into monologue mode. She spoke with the confidence of someone convinced emotion alone could win any argument. But Maher and Gutfeld kept asking the questions she avoided, and she couldn't answer even one. Her reasoning weakened, her tone cracked, and her certainty couldn't cover the growing holes in her story. She was trying to hold up a message built on shaky ground, and it collapsed live on air. Maher didn't shout. He didn't insult her. He simply watched as the conversation collapsed on its own. And then, right as things reached their peak, Sunny completely lost the thread. She began racing through topics at lightning speed: race, brunch, climate justice, the cost of organic groceries, anything she could throw out to escape the contradictions she'd created. It sounded like she had a spinning wheel of buzzwords in her head and was hoping one would distract the room long enough to reset the moment. But Greg and Maher weren't reacting. They weren't bothered or offended. They were amused. Then she tried explaining oppression by talking about oat milk and yogurt prices. At that point, she didn't sound like a journalist anymore. She sounded like a wellness influencer giving a politically themed pep talk to college freshmen. Greg raised one eyebrow and added a small, quiet joke. The illusion cracked instantly. The real issue wasn't just her words, it was her tone. She spoke like a teacher lecturing a room full of slow students, as if everyone else was too simple to grasp her brilliance. She tried connecting capitalism, racism, and diet choices into one argument and called it meaningful analysis. It was like watching someone walk headfirst into a glass door and then blame the architect. Her monologues weren't explanations. They were performances stitched together from slogans. Yet she believed every word. Every dramatic pause. Every sharp inhale meant to emphasize her big point. She wasn't enlightening anyone. She was digging herself deeper. Maher caught it immediately. He didn't mock her. He didn't get angry. He simply dropped lines of plain truth that cut through her speech like a knife. At one point, he said, "The emperor has no clothes," and you could feel the whole table shift. She didn't pause, didn't reflect, didn't consider she might be wrong. She doubled down, letting emotion drag her deeper into a hole she couldn't climb out of. Greg called it exactly what it was: performance activism, pretending to fight for justice while offering nothing useful. Maher and Gutfeld weren't trying to tear her apart. They were preventing the show from sinking completely under the weight of her contradictions. It wasn't an attack. It was damage control. Then Maher delivered the final question, calm and steady. How can someone claim to be open-minded while silencing anyone who disagrees? Sunny froze. No comeback. No quick spin. Just silence. The kind of silence that appears when truth lands so cleanly that there's nothing left to argue. She still tried to smile, still tried to act like she had won, even standing in the ruins of her own logic, insisting everything around her was fine. She didn't realize she wasn't battling Greg and Maher anymore. She was battling reality, and losing. By the end, the two men didn't need to gloat. The silence did it for them. They looked like two people who walked into a roast by accident and realized they didn't have to do anything. Sunny was roasting herself. And yet she kept going, presenting herself as the nation's moral guide, demanding tolerance while refusing to hear different views, preaching empathy while showing none of it.